Welcome to the AI Argument.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to the AI Argument. I'm Frank Prendergast. I'm here as always with Justin Collery. And do we have some great topics to argue about? Will we kick off, Justin, with the fact that ChatGPT 4.0, which is kind of the default model of ChatGPT, has been absolutely kissing everybody's ass? Have you experienced it?
I did. It's funny, right? I mean, on one level, it's like, what more do we want except an AI model that kisses your ass? Fantastic. I wish everybody would kiss my ass. It's great that we have an AI model to do it now. But we only discussed last week that in order for models to be more helpful, in fact, we need them to be more disagreeable. And that very same, almost on the same day, in fact, they released this change. How did you find it? What did you use it? Did you notice it being like sort of kissy, ass kissy?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It was horrendous.
Did you like it?
I was telling you last week, I've been using ChatGPT to kind of interrogate some business ideas. And so I noticed that like suddenly everything that I was pushing at it was like, that's brilliant. That's genius. Oh, you've nailed it. Run with it. Ship it. Do it. Go for it. And I was like, whoa, no, hang on. This is like a nascent idea. This is like the kernel of an idea that makes no sense yet. I want to bash this around with you. No, man, you've got it. Go for it. And Marcy was the same. Marcy's been using it for similar kind of purposes and was just saying like, what's going on? ChatGPT seems to think I'm an absolute genius all of a sudden.
Oh, that's so funny. Did you see what caused the issue? What caused the underlying issue?
Well, I did some digging on that. Are you talking about? Tell me what you saw.
What I saw was, I think it was Ethan Moloch had a diff, so a compare between the old system prompt and the new system prompt. And basically, I can't remember exactly, they made some minor changes. They weren't big changes. They certainly didn't say become a sycophantic ass kisser, right? They were just, being a bit more helpful or whatever. And that was what caused the behavior, and they just reversed it.
Now we do have to take that with a little pinch of salt, because those system prompts were through Pliny the Liberator. Is that his name? Pliny the Liberator, yes.
Yep.
So they're not from like the official, they're not from OpenAI. Now, he is very good at what he does. I would tend to believe that those are the system prompts if he says they are. And what was interesting was, if they were actually the system prompts, what they were trying to do was dial down the sycophancy. And they accidentally turned it up to 11.
Yeah.
Now, I came across something else really interesting, which was, so, we were talking about this last week because this is a general issue with LLMs, because of various reasons. Actually, there's a couple of different studies on sycophancy over the last couple of years, but I think a lot of people think that it's heavily to do with reinforcement learning from human feedback. It's also to do with training data. It's also to do with the fact that just alignment is difficult. There's various, issues at play. But what I read, and again, it was from a guy who was ex-Microsoft, I think. So presumably he had inside information. But again, it's not coming directly from OpenAI. But he said that when they were releasing the original memory feature, the one that you could go in and see what it was storing in the memory, he said that because the model was quite blunt at the time, what was happening was things were getting added to memory like, yeah, Frank's quite narcissistic.
And that was influencing the future behavior.
Well, they felt that people were upset. Like, people who were testing the model were like, that's not good. That's going to freak people out. So they dialed up the sycophancy on purpose through the reinforcement learning, through human feedback. So now what they were trying to do was like tweak it back down again, and they had the opposite effect. Now, a lot of this stuff is coming not directly from OpenAI. They gave a statement on it that was very vague. It did say that it was down to reinforcement, or LHF. I've got to stop trying to say the whole thing.
Reinforcement learning human feedback,
So they blamed a lot of it on that, and they did mention the system prompt possibly being a factor, but it was all very, very vague and kind of unsatisfying. But if
interesting thing, right, that
resources are
you
true,
sort of hit on there, right, is that it is, right, it strikes me that an AI in the future believe that we will have one AI interface with one personality, because that's not how we react in the real world. So I would love to have a team of AIs when I'm working on a problem. And, one of them, is going to kiss my ass, because everybody likes to have their ass kissed every now and then. I mean, who wouldn't, But one of them is going to be totally disagreeable, and one of them is going to be a nerd, and the other one's going to be an artist, and the other's going to be, and you place value on the different perspectives. So this idea that they're creating a monolithic AI to cater for every situation, I don't know how long lasting that is. I can see a future where you on purpose you set up your team of AIs with different personalities. And so I guess what I'm saying is,
absolutely.
it's okay. You should be the one in control of these personality traits, and you should be able to dial up the sycophancy yourself if you want to, or dial it down and whatever. And there may be instances where you want to do that. And it's interesting that.
And you can do it to a degree, to a certain degree. So like when ChatGPT was at the absolute height of its worst sycophancy due to this error, I created a custom GPT called Strategic Advisor. And I, developed instructions for that GPT that cut out loads of fluff and that just really got to the point and was really incisive and really challenged my ideas. And what's funny is you might think like, oh yeah, why doesn't Frank just use that all the time? But exactly as you say, having instructed it to do so, sometimes I get really annoyed with it because it comes back and it goes, no, that's an awful idea. You've said this, but you haven't backed it up with facts. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's fine. I'm just going to publish it anyway.
That brings me on to that makes you special for a couple of reasons. But one of them is that something that happened this week is, are you the only person on the planet left using custom GPTs? Because I don't believe anybody else is using custom GPTs on the entire planet. I think we found the one user right here in the AI argument.
Why is that? They are so powerful.
Well, that's brilliant, and I'm delighted for you, right? This week, so I want to just point out that this week a big release that's happened is Claude or Anthropic have, through their Claude interface, now released plugins through this thing, Model Context Protocol, MCP. And you can now connect those to public internet-facing MCP servers. So if you've got a service or you've got an internal company website or whatever it is, you can now connect Claude to it, which is cool. But that's not the best of it.
In the words of Homer Simpson, could you dumb it down a little, Doc?
Okay. So the thing is, you've got these things called MCPs, right? Model Context Protocols. And what that is it's like a manual for Claude. And in fact, it's an open source thing, right? So lots of different models use it now. So let's say I'm the Irish Times, right? And let's say I want the AI to be able to use the Irish Times website to access my articles and do stuff. In fact, this is a great example, right? So what MCP does is the model, so Claude in this case, can talk to the Irish Times website and say, hey, I'm an AI. What tools have you got available? And it'll say, hey, I'm the Irish Times. We have search news. That too, and in the search news tool, you need to provide me with your terms. We have the top news. We have and whatever categories. And so it explains what all the different tools are. And then the model can decide to use the tools as and when it needs, right? But it's an open standard, right? So it could be a news website, or it could be a database, or it could be the works of, Thomas Edison, or it could be whatever. It could be your internal CRM. It could be a database with your sales. It could be anything, right? It sort of standardizes that communication. But anyway, back to our Irish Times. So now what they did this week is that was really only available in the APIs, but this week now they've made it available through the Claude web interface. So within the web interface, you can say, hey, can you use this MCP server over there? And it sort of makes it very customizable for you, right? You can point to, I can imagine if you're in a company or whatever, you could have an internal MCP server that has, documents that you might want to use. So instead of writing a chatbot You can just have an MCP server and point Claude at it and job done, right? Brilliant. The better thing that's happened this week, back to my Irish Times example, is Stripe, the Irish company set up by the Collision brothers, who are absolutely fantastic, have also put a plugin into MCP allowing you to charge for access to the MCP server. Now, that's a big deal, right? So if you're somebody and you have an idea for creating a product or a service or whatever, and you want it to be used by AI, you can use MCP to advertise to the AI your product or service, in this case, the Irish Times or whatever it is, and you can use Stripe to collect money for access to your service. And I think that's brilliant. Was that dumbed down?
That is smart. That is smart. That is
That
very
makes
cool.
sense.
That is very cool.
So that's what I was looking at this week in the haze of everything that was going on, and I'm not quite sure how we got onto that, but it's the Stripe connection along with the MCP integration into Claude is a big deal, and that's been going on the last week.
That's very interesting, and then that's powerful. That's going to throw up some really interesting implementations from people, I would say.
Because the incentives are now aligned, right? It's a really,
Yeah.
for propeller heads like me, it's brilliant. I mean, can I come up with an idea where somebody will pay me a couple of cents an inquiry and I can just advertise it through an MCP server? Maybe I will. Oh, I know what brought us back to it. My question about whether this will work is OpenAI tried to do this, 15 months ago with custom GPTs, of which you are the only person left on the entire planet using them. And they were even going to have a revenue share model. You remember that Sam, just before Sam got fired, this was part of the thing. And so Anthropic, only 50 short months later, have got around to putting the whole thing together.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's it. Anyway, other news, Frank, that's caught your eye this week. Anything controversial?
Yeah. There was the unauthorized Reddit experiment that caught my eye.
What did you think of that?
So the story is that there is a subreddit called, I think it's called Change My Mind, and people can put up their opinions, and then people can have a debate, argument, whatever, and try to change their mind. And a research group, I need to check where they were from Zurich somewhere. They basically developed all these chatbots, gave them personalities, gave them backgrounds. Some of them were controversial in themselves, in that one of them was a black man who didn't support the Black Lives Matter movement. Another one was a rape victim. So they were quite, they were quite controversial in and of themselves. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then these chatbots basically tried to change people's minds on this subreddit, and they would access the Reddit users' history of engagements to learn as much as they could about the user in order to present arguments that were likely to resonate with them.
Yep.
Nobody on Reddit knew this was happening, and that's what's causing a lot of controversy.
Frank,
and Reddit are trying. I'm sorry. Say that again. You broke up a little.
How did this make you feel?
I have very mixed feelings about it, because on one hand, I understand that if somebody knowing that this experiment is going on, it's going to change how they act. And there is precedent for scientific studies where people don't know they're taking part, because that would invalidate the research. And I think it's important research. I think it's important stuff that we find out. The only thing I would say is that I think it was Ethan Mollick pointed to some other studies that have looked into this. And so my question would be, is it or is it not possible to do this in a way that people can give consent? But I think what it raises is a much, much tougher thing, is that, like, in one way, I'm glad this happened, because it brings our attention to the fact that we could all be part of experiments that we're not aware of. Like,
We might
now
be a part of an experiment.
Yeah. If you're on Twitter, if you're on any social media platform, you've no idea who you're interacting with most of the time, unless, I know it's you, I've connected with you, I know it's you. If I'm connecting with someone that I don't necessarily know, or if I'm engaging with conversation with randomers on Twitter, I have no idea if it's a bot or if it's not. I've been accused.
I guarantee you, Frank, that you're being manipulated right now, because what was you ran Dominic Cummings in the UK, who was Boris Johnson's campaign manager, hired that company, Cambridge Analytica, if you remember, to do exactly what you're describing. And I remember watching a documentary about them, and they were paid millions and millions, and they had the numbers to back it up. They were a proper statistical company, and they were able to say, look, yes, we can move by 1 or 2% the result of an election just by posting on Twitter and Facebook, and they were doing exactly what this bot did on Reddit. They were going through your profile and reading, what you're interested in, and then posting stories. Now, can you imagine that hooked up to modern day
wasn't
AI?
Even, yeah, exactly. I was going to say that wasn't even conversational. It was just posting stuff that people would just move their opinion ever so slightly. So now with the conversational capabilities, and apparently they took it down again because of the controversy, I think, but there was an abstract of the paper made available, and it showed that the bots were way more effective at persuading people, at changing people's minds than the human Redditors. So
this isn't the first study to show that, as you've already said. It's well known that the bots are more persuasive than humans. Now, what I would also caution you, because I really like the method, right, where they go through and find your history to find things. Now, put that together with multimodal capability, where they can also look at the images and figure out where you, like the stuff you're seeing. Where I did another test actually last night. I was watching, here's an interesting thing for you now, right? I was watching an old movie last night with Something's Gotta Give was the name of the movie, with Jack Nicholson in it. Dates a younger woman. It's kind of entertaining. Anyway, I was there, I was watching the movie, and I decided to, using O3, take a photo of my TV with the movie on and say, what movie am I watching? And it guessed wrong first. And then it said, no, I've seen that movie. It's not that one. Try again. And it goes and guesses a second time. And then it goes, oh, I see, it's Jack Nicholson. And that's whatever, I can't remember the female actress is called. She's wearing a particular type of top. And that's very suggestive of the movie Something's Gotta Give. Now, do you think for a second that model is not trained on every movie that's ever been shown to be able to tell you what movie it is? Of course it is. Of course it is, right? But anyway, my point in relation to the persuasion thing is, if it can look at your images and it knows where you've gone to holidays, and it's able to pick up, really information that maybe even we can't pick up, right? It's spotting things, that we didn't even realize was being given away in pictures, and it's putting together a profile for you in order to convince you. But that's not future tech. That's today tech. That can happen right now.
Yeah.
That's frightening the crap out of you, Frank.
So do you think that the study itself, would you say that would you say that the positives of doing that study outweigh the ethical gray area?
I don't think it's even up for debate in my mind. Absolutely. Right. It's the same reason that you have open source software, right? The more that it's out in the open, right, and the more that people know, yes, this is possible. Yes, you can be manipulated. Like, what else? Although it's going to happen anyway. So the best thing to do is to do the studies, and then look at how to address whatever comes out in the study. So do the social media platforms need to do something to stop this from happening? Do we need to be educated in a different way so we can spot when we're being manipulated? But the technology exists already. So yes, it's good to, the study it was done in the way that I would do it too, right? Because if you let people know, it invalidates the study, just as you said. And two, it's a really good study to do, and we need to do more of them. And it's almost good publicity, the bad publicity, because it sort of brings people's attention to it. So I'd agree with you. But I think you should be even more frightened of it. I think it should scare you. I'm kind of like, we're always, look at, so do you know who invented marketing?
I actually don't know. Well, you'd think that'd be something I would know.
Yeah, marketing was invented by Freud's cousin, or his nephew, I should say, famous American guy. I can't remember his name now. "Smoke Your Way to Freedom" was one of his first marketing campaigns. But he was a psychologist basically. His thing was to manipulate you into buying products. That was marketing using psychological. And this is the same, but much more powerful. So it should frighten the crap out of you.
Another thing that caught my eye was a kind of a series of things really coming from LlamaCon. So Meta had their first LlamaCon, their Llama conference. Apparently they had live llamas wandering around outside that you could take selfies with.
It's a shame we missed that.
But all reports seem to be that it was a bit meh, and everyone was expecting them to show off Behemoth, which is their reasoning model that they hinted at quite recently when they released Llama 4 in April. But there was no sign of it. There was no major model announced at all, I don't think. And not only that, but what's the name of the model? Qwen 3, is it, from Alibaba, was released the day before LlamaCon. And a lot of people are saying that was a very strategically placed release date to release this Qwen 3 model, which by their own benchmarks beats all of the current Llama models. So there, some of the reports I read were that like the mood at LlamaCon was a little bit subdued because everyone knew that the products were actually not performing on a par with their competitors.
And not for the one client, they spent about 60 billion quid over the last couple of years. 60 billion with a B, trying to get their AI right. So I would say there's a lot of people under a lot of pressure in Meta to get this right.
Yeah. Now there was something really interesting that I figured would very much interest you as well, because you've talked on the show quite a bit about the singularity. And I know the singularity means different things to different people, but in this case, we're talking about that moment when basically AI can develop itself, replicate itself, and suddenly you have this just intelligence explosion, essentially, artificial intelligence explosion. And Zuckerberg was having a chat on stage with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. This was at LlamaCon. And he just kind of casually dropped something into the conversation, and I spotted it through Matthew Berman's YouTube channel. He's always worth watching. And the little bomb that he just casually dropped in was that he said, the big one we're focusing on is building AI and a machine learning engineer to advance a lot of development itself. And he also repeated it on the Dwarkesh podcast. And in that podcast, he actually gave it a 12 to 18 month time frame for when most of the code going towards the efforts of building AI would be written by AI.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Do you think? It's nuts.
Well, it's okay. So what do I think? First, for the people who don't, just to bring maybe everybody up to speed, at the moment we're constrained by human, number of good developers we have and so on, right? So if you're trying to develop good AIs, right, human resource and compute resource are your two limitations. So they've spent, as I said, 60 billion so far. They're not really compute limited. And so if you can have the AI interrogate itself and write better code and improve itself, it's like a flywheel, and it'll optimize itself in ways that we don't even understand. And it will do it recursively until it gets better. Doctor, heal thyself, get better and better and better. So that's a big deal. What do I think about it? If you will remember, 2 or 3 weeks ago, the guy, Andrew, I can't remember his surname, who works in the Google DeepMind, said that they had already done it. And we talked about it briefly. So he had said they got a model internally to develop a reinforcement learning algorithm, and it came up with a brand new algorithm that was better than anything they could ever come up with themselves. So what this tells me, and also, we had the thing that I broke out laughing at over the 12 days of Xmas, where the guy who was demonstrating O3 said, we should get it to prove itself. And he promptly got slapped down by Sam Altman and told to shut up. So we can now confidently say that Meta are about 18 months behind Google and OpenAI. That's what we can say. So I'm not that blown away by it. I'm blown away by how bleeding late you are. Get a move on. The other guys have been there for quite a long time already.
It sounds a little bit like I'm we also talked on the show about how like Devon, the coding assistant, turned out to be like a complete flop and really was not dependable and couldn't really do much. And I mean, even Zuckerberg and Satya Nadella, when they were talking in terms of how they're using the tools a lot, but at the same time, there's a lot of limitations right now. So 12 to 18 months, like if nobody is experiencing, like, I know there's a lot of code that AI is involved in, is, you know, actually going into products, etc. But the leap to it being able to code itself just seems like a huge leap to me, when most developers are saying that the tools are really useful, but you absolutely have to have like a senior developer at the helm, or it all just goes to pot.
Yeah, it's slowly and then all at once, I think, is how this will happen. It's such a difficult time to be involved in IT strategy and in developing products like Devon. So again, we come back to the thing that the capabilities of the AI models, we used to say would double every 12 months, and it now seems to be shortening to about every 7 months, 6 to 7 months. And the cost goes down by 90%. So it's almost like a first mover curse rather than a first mover advantage, because for a lot of, like, there's always this urge to do something, right? Let's make it an agent to write code. Well, maybe hanging around for 6 months would make a big difference, because and I don't know if you've seen it, they have benchmarks now for how long the agent can run without needing human intervention, and that's one of the things. The other thing that's doubling, I think it's every 6 or 7 months as well. So and then there's the thing that we're all just learning how to do this, right? We're together, right? We're learning how to do it. And I remember, from many years ago, one of the principles behind Linux, the open source operating system, was that every module must be very small and very self-contained and have a very singular purpose. And if you apply that thinking to what you just described, you end up having code that's just nice and distinct, and it's easy for the AI to understand. So that seems like a good design principle in that context. And then there's a huge debate online about, there's a thing of, developers. I used to go to lunch with a developer. I was only talking to him yesterday. And one of my favorite games at lunch would be to distract him and then move his fork like 10 degrees off center. And that would just annoy him, and he'd put it back 10 degrees back that way again. Really good developers have this thing where everything has to be absolutely perfect, right? It has to be written in the right way. And they could, I mean, what's your name? The guy who invented Linux, was his Linus. I mean, he's an asshole, basically. He's famous for his commit messages being just like, why are you sending me this shit? Whatever, because somebody put a comma in the wrong place. And whereas nowadays, like, should you care, right? No human is ever going to read this code, right? So just, if it works, go with it. Move on to the next problem. And the AIs, so it's such a difficult time to be involved in AI. And I do think that, and when I say slowly and then all at once, like, at the moment it can't do it, but I could see in 12 months with the doubling time and the increase in whatever, all the things I've described there, suddenly you would find it's almost like a grain of sand, and the whole thing collapses, and now suddenly, yes, most code is written by AI.
Sure. I will say it also concerns me, because we had a research firm, Apollo Group, release a paper kind of about this, really, where they are concerned that a lot of AI development, I mean, historically, all development until the whole ChatGPT explosion, prior to that, all of AI development was public, and it was all done in universities, etc., pretty much. And now we're moving to this, like, AI development in private companies, and they are concerned about exactly this. They're concerned about when the companies move to automating development and the AI models potentially becoming much more powerful. And they outline some of the risks, the possible risks, which are not just about the AI being powerful, but about the power that then gives these companies.
Yeah.
And when it's companies like Meta, I have to say that I would share their concerns. So their concerns are essentially like, one was that an AI model could run amok within a company, taking control of everything inside the company. Another risk was one or more companies dominating economically thanks to their AI automations, and I think that's a very tangible risk. And then their most dramatic kind of possible scenario was one in which they basically gained so much power that these companies, the way they put it is that they rival society itself and defy government oversight. So I think we need to be paying attention when Mark Zuckerberg is like, oh yeah, we're developing this to do this, and I think we need to maybe take those statements into consideration within the context of these possibilities that the Apollo Group are outlining.
I think it's not going to happen. You'll be fine. So
I thought you just said it was going to happen.
No, not all those terrible things you just talked about are going to happen. It'll be fine, right? For a couple of reasons, right? So here's the counterpoint to Apollo's report, right? The counterpoints. So the first is that one company could develop an AI which is really super, super powerful. And what we've discovered in particular the last 6 months, is that's very unlikely to happen, right? We now have lots of companies, and some companies that are relatively very small that seem to be able to develop these AI models very quickly to a very high level, and that's likely to continue. So the chances of just one company doing something that's way better than everybody else now seems to be very small. We're going to have lots of them. And the second reason that I'd be too worried about it is that it's also very obvious that there's pace of change is now dictated by us, by humans, not by the AI. So we have this huge technical overhang. We have this technology which can do wonderful things, but it takes years, maybe decades, for people and companies to actually harness it and do it. So even if you had tomorrow, Frank, if I was to give you an AI which was 10 times as powerful as the best AI that existed today, what could you do with it? Like, what could you do anything terrible? No, I don't, because society would have to, in terms of commercially, what could you do? Obviously the bad actor can do terrible things, but he can do terrible things today, but commercially it's not going to make a massive difference, I don't think.
But I think what the paper is warning about is, not what I could do with it so much as what could OpenAI do with it, who have all of that situational awareness and have a much better understanding of how to structure in order to take advantage of the intelligence. I mean, it might take somebody outside of an AI lab, it might, or company, it might take somebody a long time to figure out how to, unleash an AI on the stock market in such a way as to gain massive wealth. However, for all we know, OpenAI are working on that in the basement right now. So
probably have it already, let's be honest. Listen to me, we're nearly up on time. Any entertaining stories this week?
Well, there was another comment from Zuckerberg, which isn't an entertaining story, but it will lead us into a disturbing story, which could be seen as entertaining.
All right, good. I like that. My favorite.
You sent me that quote from Mark Zuckerberg where he was on the Dwarkesh podcast.
This is his one about everybody has demand for 5 friends.
Yes, I demand 5 friends, Justin. I demand them.
So, if that was just the creepiest comment. So he's there and he's talking about everybody. The average American has on average 2 friends, but they have a demand for 5 friends. Like, sorry, their friends are not widgets. They're soya beans that demand goes up and down depending on the weather and how much sunshine there is. You don't have a demand
15,
for 5
15.
friends.
We're underselling him now, in fairness. He actually said we have demand for 15.
Oh, do we? And some of us have demand for up to 50, as they are 60. So, and some of us, certainly the more autistic of us, have a demand for 0 friends. But it just was just the creepiest thing I'd ever heard. And then he was going to provide, and you have a demand, Frank, for 15 friends, and I'm going to provide you with 14 artificial friends. You can have 1 real one. What a weirdo.
What I found really odd about it was he said that he believes that, physical connection is better and more important and everything. but that we just don't have as much of that as we would like. And so his answer is to fill that void with AI. And I'm like,
Brilliant.
what, this is the man who at the start of this year was putting ferocious pressure on his employees and, saying that he was going to, cut anyone who was an underperformer. And he has been doing that. And I'm like, well, maybe a way we could address this is, put people on a 4-day work week and tell them to go and make more physical connections and make more friends, instead of saying, no, tell you what, work 22 hours a day, but we'll give you 15 AI friends, you'll be grand.
There you go. Or we'll fire you, in which case you can have as much physical contact as you want all day long because there's nothing else to do.
Well, maybe that's maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's why he's firing all those people. It's out of the goodness of his heart so that they can have 15 real friends. He's a nice Justin guy, really. You're spot on. But this brings us to the other story, which is kind of connected, which is, so I don't know if you know this about me, Justin, but I actually ring my mom every day for a chat. I've got great news.
Every day, Frank?
I do. Yeah, I do.
I hope my mother isn't watching this. Jesus Christ, I do. Jesus.
So I received wonderful news. I can pay $26 a month to never have to call my mother again. I can get an AI to call her.
And will the AI sound like you? Because that seems to be one of the most difficult questions or problems to solve in AI.
They've drawn the line at making it sound like me. They have said that the recipient of the calls must be aware that it's AI and it cannot sound like somebody they know. So they have drawn that line in the sand. And I will say, to be fair, so the idea here is it calls usually an elderly person. I think it's designed specifically for the elderly. It will call an elderly person for a 5-minute chat, and it will then, and this sounds kind of creepy, like it sends a report to the family members. Now, I understand why that could be important, obviously, and it will also alert family members if a call is not taken, and if there's a dip in mood, if it detects a dip in mood. Now, to be fair, the guy who invented it because he was in a completely different time zone to his mother, and he couldn't call her every day. And so I can see the logic, but I can also just see so many ways that this goes wrong and how it just sounds like a Black Mirror episode.
Oh my God, it's so creepy. But I'm okay to give him his fair dues, right? I don't want to phone my mother, but if it could phone my teenage kids to make sure they're okay on a Friday night, that might be a winner. I might actually pay for that one. Oh, good Lord. I think that's just the worst. I mean, I'm almost imagining you just need AI to do this. I mean, an IVR system from the last 25 years would have done that. Press 1 if your hip hurts. Press 2 if your arthritis is worse.
Well, but this goes back to the kind of the whole persuasive nature of LLMs and all that kind of side of things, doesn't it? Because, the journalist who covered this story tried it out with his own mother just so that they could have the actual experience of it. And he was, I think he was expecting his mother to kind of not be into it at all. She loved it. She thought it was great. She really enjoyed the calls.
But the funny thing, I do think that part, so long as it's initiated by the person, the elderly person, and not your good for nothing kid who doesn't want to talk to you anymore. I think that part, it has a huge benefit, right? And if they have memory and stuff, I can see that's brilliant. But only if the elderly person wants it, not if you're, not as some sort of creepy way of generating a report to find out when mother's arthritis is getting worse.
Yeah. So I think we're oddly enough, I think we're both agreed on that one, that there's pros and cons, but we have to be very, very careful about these types of implementations. But in the right circumstances, there is an argument to be made for it, I guess.
All is well in the world, Frank. We're in agreement.
We're in agreement. Well, this is happening too often, though. This is happening too often. Just we'll have to find some incredibly contentious debates for next week.
All right, I'll work with it. That's it. Leave me to it.